used to hold meetings, which would be, some people would be in a conference room, and then we would have a projector, you know, and, you know, with the slides on the wall. And then we would have to have like Skype for Business or a phone bridge, you know, a phone call. And it would take 20 minutes to get those meetings going with all the technical stuff. And now we seem to be able to hit the ground running on meetings. So there's one good thing that's come out of this now.
Everyone's had lots of practice. And
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not the. Oh, can we hear the one person on the speakerphone? I can't tell.
Right.
Are they trying to talk? Yeah.
Yeah.
I did a couple of those for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
We're gonna see how this goes. Enable live transcription, auto transcription. So it can either go well or not so well.
That was going really well until you whispered, I think.
Probably, yeah.
I'm just impressed that it's getting anything at all, because I've seen some live transcription ones that are like, those are not the words coming out of that person's mouth right now.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, I'm wondering if I accidentally started the meeting a little early, because it's just.
It did start recording. I got a message saying. Yeah.
But I don't remember hitting anything. So either way, I'll cut this beginning part out so no one will see it. So, hi Burke, you're back.
So Danielle, you're at UC Irvine?
I am.
Okay. I'm in Davis, very close to UC Davis.
Yeah, I flew up there once. Your campus is beautiful.
Yeah. It's a cool town. I've lived here for 30 years now, so I guess it's my home.
Yeah, I've been at Irvine for 15 now.
Oh.
No, sorry, UC 15 and Irvine 11.
Wow.
How are you guys all doing? I'm Burke.
Hello.
Good to meet you.
Hi, Burke.
Is my audio coming through okay? I'm connected via phone now, which is a little different. Great.
Yeah. Sounds good to me. Yeah.
So we're just waiting for 2 more people, and then more people, participants will start to come in at 3.
So Jane and Sierra, where are you guys coming from? I mean, I assume we'll do an intro here in a second, but I'm curious to meet you guys.
We both work for the Department of Water Resources, based in Sacramento, but I think we both live in Davis, right?
Yeah,
Yep.
both in Davis.
Oh.
Graduated last year.
Great. I see the NHD up behind you.
Yeah.
It's been a valuable data set for me in the past. So.
Oh, good. Yeah, I lead the stewardship program for California, NHD.
Oh, great.
So
Great.
we're working to.
How did you get started in that?
We got funding. So it took a long time. It took a long time to convince the state to give us money to do this, but we managed to get it done after the drought. You know, the 2014, 2015, 2016 drought. It was actually started earlier than that. In 2014, it was declared an emergency. And with declared emergencies come more funding. And so we took advantage of that to do some pilot projects and convince the rest of the powers that be that you got to have good maps if you're going to have good water plans. And so we have dedicated funding now on an annual basis, which is awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, congrats. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Hi, David. I went ahead and made you a co-host, so your video should hopefully work.
Perfect.
And also, I just wanted to double check, are you okay with us recording the session?
Yeah, absolutely.
Great, thank you. We are just waiting for our moderator. I don't know if I accidentally hit for the webinar to start or if it just did it automatically because Zoom's being a little weird today. But there are a couple of attendees listening in already, but we will officially start at 3 o'clock. Okay, I'm gonna go close my window because it's the Little Mermaid right now.
Yeah, Burke, where are you based out of these days? I think I saw that.
I'm based out of the Bay Area here. So we had until this week an office in Palo Alto, which you know, we just let the lease go because we're all working remote. We're a Bay Area company, but we have offices in Houston and DC, and you know, we're trying to make it easier for people. Well, I should save all this for. I don't know why I was asking you guys questions about stuff today, but you know, we're trying to make it easier for people to access and work with geodata. You know, targeting non-technical users at kind of a high level.
Cool.
So I'm in here. I'm in these talks. I'm a UC alum. I went to Santa Barbara. Hi, David. I see you just joined. How you doing?
Hey, Burke. Pretty good. How about yourself?
Doing good. What's where are you coming from?
So my background is in computer science from UC Riverside, and it's an interesting story. I was hired as an intern for ESRI right after my graduation. Well, actually do it right before my graduation. But then I managed to stay on board after my graduation, and I'm working right now in the Geo AI team from ESRI. So it's a pretty exciting world. Essentially, I'm trying to walk the middle path between machine learning and then GIS and how we can bring machine learning solutions to solve various GIS related business problems. And that's where I am right now.
Great. At AGU last year, I saw a talk given by ESRI folks talking about some of the new like Jupyter Notebook compatibility and some of those ML pieces that were a little bit more, I don't know, some more plug and play than just running Python scripts. But
That's awesome. Was that a talk delivered by Shannon Kaliski by any chance?
I don't remember. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I know there were two presenters. Like one was an ML guy, you know, who looked more like a knowledge expert, and the other was more BD. That's what I recall.
Got it.
Hi, Aaron. I went ahead and made you, I promoted you to a panelist and made you co-host. So everyone, this is Erin. She's our moderator for the session. We're going to start in a couple minutes, like formally.
Yeah, I think I joined anonymously. I don't know why. I've got so many Zooms going on. So I'm trying to get the symbol to make me look official, but so if I get into a wormhole here, just wake me up. Maybe I should just sign in. If you lose me, it's only because I'm signing in.
I see your name already, Aaron.
Okay.
You didn't come in as anonymous.
Okay. Thanks, Jane.
I see a background.
Oh, okay. Yeah. All right. It's not the official one, but at least, you know. And then there's me, and I was going to do, not that you need to see me, but I'm on a mission to get this right. Haha. All right. That's not too bad. But I can stop my video once we get started. disturb. Okay. I turned off all my notifications. Thumbs up. So it is 3 o'clock. So I wanted to get started on this great career panel. I do have a set of questions, and then if anyone else has any questions to pop in, I'm very free form. I'm not, if I don't get one of my questions answered, I'm okay. But if we get into a good discussion about careers in GIS, that's what we're here to do. And that's actually really my passion for coming to UC Merced. Before coming to UC Merced, I worked as a private consultant and worked for various agencies, public, private, nonprofit. So I feel like I've been in a lot of different places and had the fortunate opportunity to be exposed to different ways you can have careers in GIS. And so now at UC Merced, I work with students on how they can maybe find a pathway. So we have this great panel. First, we have Burke Greer with Geosite. And I'm not going to read his bio unless you want me to. I think we'll just paste it into chat. But he holds an MA from UC Santa Barbara. So I've got a Santa Barbara student right now. And a PhD from the College of Forestry at Oregon State University. We also have Sierra Mabanta with California Department of Water Resources. And she became involved in GIS after transferring to UC Davis, which has awesome opportunities there, as does Santa Barbara. We have our friend of UC Merced, and probably a friend of others, Jane Schafer-Kramer with the Department of Water Resources. She's a geographic data specialist and works as the technical lead for the state stewardship of the National Hydrography data set. That's why I'm not reading. I'd rather talk. She has done she's involved in a lot of leadership things. So we'll paste that into the chat. So if you can follow her activities and how you can maybe get involved in these different organizations. And then lastly, we have David Yu, who's a data scientist with ESRI's Geo AI team, where he works on applying machine learning to problems in the imagery space, such as object tracking, anomaly detection. So thank you, Leah, for assembling this amazing panel. So I guess before we get into it, let's see. Awesome. Okay, I tend to get distracted by the chat. I will just go in order of who I introduced. So my first question that came up is, what was your initial exposure to GIS? Like and what drew you in? Like what was there any theme or any concept that drew you into GIS? So I'll start with Burke first.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you so much for those nice intros. I'm really excited to be part of this panel and to meet the other panelists and talk with everybody on here. So thank you guys, everybody, for being here today. The first thing that got me into GIS, well, let me start with a paper map. I started hiking and backpacking when I was younger, and I always loved the topographic maps and understanding where I was in the mountains and trying to kind of track where I was located using topography and route planning and all these things. But that was really my first use of maps. But really, I fell into it accidentally. So I took a GIS class at the University of Michigan when I was undergraduate. And it was, your classic, early GIS class. Like, here's some tools, here are some case studies, like try to solve it with some data and dive into it. And I just really loved it. I really loved the mapping piece, like the art of that, the cartography of that, but I also really liked the data and working with data and going from there. That one class plus, I took another biology class. Ultimately, that turned into essentially an internship over at USGS in Ann Arbor. because it was a GIS job, they basically needed someone to come in and do species distribution modeling, which meant finding different environmental data layers like the NHD data set, for example, and using those to build models. So that kind of started there, and kind of kicked off the rest of what I've done, really. Aaron, I share too, with you. I did research work. I've worked with private groups. I've contracted, done back to grad school, worked at every tower. So I know there's lots of different ways of doing GIS. But I've been able to do all those things because I took a GIS class at the beginning.
Very cool. Well, thank you. Next, Sierra. So what was what drew you into GIS and your exposure?
Initially, I didn't really, wasn't actually really that interested in maps until I had gotten to UC Davis and I had seen how resourceful they were and how many GIS resources there actually were at the school. And I was able to learn all about maps, and I would always love topography. I love how beautiful they looked, but always was interested in maybe trying to make them. And I was always kind of worried about money. Whenever I heard the word like ESRI, it was a big scary word. But I was amazed when I first attended the Map Time Davis workshops at UC Davis, and that's really where I got to learn about how helpful they were. And I was able to learn about open source and QGIS. And from there, I was able to make my own maps at home just for fun. And at these workshops, I was able to really learn on how to make maps. And it was more of like a step-by-step process that we would all go through together. So a lot of the times, people there didn't really know what they were doing either. So it was really great. And those workshops were really awesome. And I got an internship at the school, at the Hyman's lab. And there we did a ton of QGIS, and we also worked with ESRI products, which is amazing. I started to get my minor in GIS there, and I was able to take remote sensing classes, and it was really interesting just being able to work all different aspects of GIS. I also, in my lab, got to work with some drone imagery, and also got my pilot's license there, and I was able to I was able to learn as well coding through QGIS, and it was just a whole load of experiences, and I just became immersed in it. And after that internship, I graduated, and I got a job at the state as a scientific aide, helping the GIS analyst there at the Department of Water Resources. And that was amazing. And that was just a totally different experience. I learned all about ArcGIS Pro there. And I've just been so involved in maps since, and it's just been a great learning process, and the learning really never does stop. So I'm still working at the state, and I really enjoy it there. And I really like my time at UC Davis working on open source data. And at the state, we also, today Jane put together an amazing QGIS workshop with somebody else there today. And it's really great being able to enjoy ESRI as well as open source products as well. And I've just been in love with maps since those first classes and that internship at UC Davis.
Well, I'm glad you brought up the different software programs, because some here may have not have heard of QGIS, or they may be in ArcMap environment or Pro, and that's probably a future question I'm going to ask, but I'm going to go to Jane and kind of give us her own experience. And I was going to try to unmute you.
Okay, I found it. Sorry.
I'm bad at that.
Okay, so thanks for letting me in this panel, even though I'm not an alum of a UC. I actually discovered GIS as a midlife career change. I've got a degree in food and nutrition from a century ago, back in Illinois, where I'm from, and didn't really stay in that career. I bounced around doing a lot of different things, did a stay-at-home mom thing for a few years, and And then I found myself with a job as an office assistant at the Department of Water Resources, working as a secretary in a group full of modelers and who were modeling the State Water Project and the Delta. And they were just starting to get into GIS as a tool that they were using there. I was handling like the procurement documents and stuff. And so I started looking over people's shoulders and said, oh, I like maps. This is cool. I didn't know you could actually like get paid to do this. You know, I did have some geography courses in college with the idea that I might one day become a geography teacher, but this just really kind of blew it all open for me. And then I discovered that American River College in Sacramento has a community college has a really good GIS program. So classes were all in the evening. So I was working full time, taking care of kids and going to school at night. Took me a few years to get through that. But as soon as I was qualified to work as an entry-level GIS analyst, an opportunity, you know, opened up for me. And so those engineers that I was working with as a secretary, I was now making maps for and with them. So, then in 2016, when our department got funding to start a stewardship program for the California portion of the National Hydrography Data Set, I was invited to apply for that position. And so since then, that's what I've been doing. And but you mentioned the leadership stuff, and I can go into that later. But that's been a big part of the experience for me. It's not just doing maps and the technical part. It's also kind of the social and the networking part, and finding the data that you need, and the people who are creating that data and working with them. So it's been great so far.
Well, I'm not a UC alum either, so we're
okay, cool. All right.
But yeah, you bring up again a lot of good points, and I just wanted to say I feel like a lot of us get into this because we really love maps, and it's like you could get paid to do this, and I get frustrated that GIS people are really not paid enough as compared to other industries. So maybe Jane, you can help us bump up our salary scales. Maybe not, I'm not complaining, but I'm talking about those who actually work for cities and deal with a lot of different stuff. But thank you, Jane. And I'm going to switch over to David.
Sure. So I'm probably the odd one out here because before I joined ESRI, I really had no idea what GIS was, and I've never even taken a geography course in my life. So backtrack a couple of years, I had just graduated from University of Hong Kong, and I was mainly working as a software engineer. And I had the opportunity to come over to UC Riverside to continue my postgrad studies, also in computer science. So I'm, really focused in on just doing computer science. And of course, I was still interested in seeing how the models I was building can affect the real world. In particular, I was pretty interested in working on things like reinforcement learning, on predictive analytics, on supervised learning, so being able to train models to learn from labels in general. But really, I had no idea how any of the stuff that I was doing could ever be useful in the real world. And so when I first got my interview with ESRI, they posed a very interesting question to me. And they asked, well, assume that you can get any kind of data that you want, and you could build a model off that data. How would you come up with a model to essentially predict the likelihood of a traffic accident? And I thought that was pretty fascinating. And in fact, that was the project that my team was working on at the time, was being able to utilize multiple inputs in order to train a model to predict what is the likelihood of an accident. And if you really think about it, this is an inherently geospatial problems. Obviously I've heard about accident prediction before. This is not, this is not essentially a new problem, but I had no idea what is the amount of geospatial information that goes into constructing a model like this. So for instance, we can get any data on the physical attribute of a road, right? So we can understand for a road, what is the speed limit that's been imposed on that road? Maybe we can also understand what is the curvature that's been, that happens at certain locations. We can also have an understanding of what is the quality of the road, how many lanes there are. But some of those factors aren't inherently geospatial. And what sometimes is more important is being able to compare the different geographies of different roads. So for instance, if you compare road A to road B, they may have the same physical attributes, right? They may have the same number of lanes, they may have the same material, but because they exist in different geospatial locations, they usually have different likelihoods of an accident, right? So for instance, if you have a road out in a rural area where there's not a lot of traffic versus a road up in the mountains, obviously it's a lot more likely that the road in the mountain is going to exhibit some kind of accident. So that's these are the kind of problems that I really enjoy working on within ESRI, because ultimately what I am interested in is how can I utilize what I've already learned in the world of data science and machine learning and apply them to solve real world problems. And that's just one example. So.
Well, and your experience is actually touches upon a lot of what I experience as far as researchers approaching GIS questions from machine learning and data science perspective. So it's not just limited to pushing buttons and software. There's a lot of different ways we can analyze geospatial data. So I'm going to spotlight all four and kind of let you answer questions as a group for the sake of time. I've got a few questions here. So I think really just to anticipate maybe who our audience are, who are attending the career panel, what advice would you give to students who are interested in pursuing a career in GIS, especially for schools that don't have a GIS program or a minor or limited opportunities? What would you, what advice? So I could start with Burke first, and then we can go around the table as you see fit.
Right now, we're in such an amazing time of just available teaching and learning on the internet. I mean, it's just pretty amazing how everything from ML model approaches to mapping methodologies, all these things, there's just really amazing, online communities. So I would start there immediately, right there. I would also probably say, like, if you were trying to get into geospatial, either find or start a geospatial group. There's wherever you are, wherever I've been, and I've moved around a lot. Like I've found local communities, like whether I'm in the Bay Area now, so here we have Bay Geo, but maybe your own community or university has its own mapping group, like whether it's MapTime or any of those. I'd say start to do that. What else am I missing? Rest of
Here's Sierra. I'll let you go next. Put you on the spot.
I would really reach out to some online communities. As Burke was talking about, there are a lot of free online tutorials. I know, especially now, there's a lot of virtual workshops that people can do. I know MapTime is completely online now, and you can really utilize those resources. And if you don't have access to paid products, there's like always QGIS and R. And I would just really utilize those opportunities and try and get ahead of the game and just go to as many of those free workshops as you can. Maybe not everything is free, but I would certainly take advantage of what is free, just because a lot of those concepts are super similar, and you can just really take advantage of what you have online. And if you don't have a computer all the time, you can even, when I was in the mapping club, we did all sorts of things, geocaching. Mapping doesn't always have to be online. It can also be a fun game of going outside and drawing your own map from what you remember. So you can always mix it up and start your own kind of map time at home if you have nothing close to you, or utilize online resources. That's all.
Awesome. Okay, well then I'm going to go to Jane, since she came from the community college, and I've actually hired a lot of community college graduates without even bachelor's degrees. So I would like to hear your perspective on how to get there.
Well, my perspective is coming from within state government service, and so I really can't speak to to the rest of the world as far as GIS careers, but within the civil service in California, GIS isn't really recognized as its own discipline. My classification is Research Data Specialist 1, and they used to be a GIS in parentheses after that title, but they're working to consolidate and genericize the classifications. And so my background, you know, I fit, my educational profile fit the requirements for Research Data Analyst 1, which is, you know, the first stepping, you know, stone into that line of work. Now, for a department of close to 4,000 people with about 600 folks that are using GIS as, you know, part of their work, there are only about a dozen of us who are considered full-time GIS people. And we're more GIS generalists. So most of the folks that are doing GIS are environmental scientists, they're engineers, they're geologists. We've even got, you know, some surveyors using it. And so, and then of course, there's always a need for computer science folks who understand GIS. And so if for students who are still in college, don't just major in geography and GIS. You got to have something else to go along with it. And that's just going to, you know, make you more valuable to the organization who's hiring you. I wrote an article last year on LinkedIn that was aimed at the graduates of the class of 2019. And it's called Finding GIS Jobs in California State Government. And I think it's in the chat and in the Slack. I updated it yesterday. I figured I better go and see if all the links are still good. And then I kind of updated it. So I would invite you guys to read it. And, you know, if you have questions or you want to challenge me on any of that stuff, you can contact me through LinkedIn. So the other part of the advice is get on LinkedIn, build up your profile there, start an online portfolio if you can, so that people can discover you. And I'm also involved with URISA, Urban Regional Information Systems Association. It's a GIS professionals association. And we do have an active chapter in California. Check that out, urisa.org. There's also the California Geographic Information Association. These associations have student rates, so it's not going to cost you very much to join, and you can participate in and start meeting professionals, you know, people who are doing this for a living, and take advantage of those potential relationships there. And someday when the pandemic's over and we can get together and have conferences and mappy hours and things like that again, go to those. Okay, so that's my advice.
Well, and you bring up a good point as far as the need. You don't really need to have a GIS geography degree. And since at UC Merced, we don't have geography department, nor do I anticipate we will, and others have kind of divested their departments. And so I tell faculty, don't teach about GIS, teach with GIS. So right. Teach thematic GIS. And I think so far that's been successful approach in a lot of our own research. Not to make it about UC Merced, but you bring up a really good point about you don't have to know everything about GIS to do GIS. Right. There are different pathways for everybody. So don't get hung up on like, I don't know GIS. So we all know GIS. We use it every day. All right. Well, David, I will.
Erin, can I make one comment just in response to that?
Sure.
I think two things. I think that to do GIS well, you can't only know GIS.
Yeah.
Like, you really do need to be outside of that. And I love, Jay, that your job is a GIS person. It's a GIS job. It's a research analyst. That's what you're doing with all the data. It may be in a map, but that's what you're really doing with the data. You 100%, I agree with everything you're saying there, Aaron. Like, you want to know GIS, but really you need to know the other things as well.
Yeah, totally agreed as well. So taking the words right out of my mouth. So I think what's really valuable is understanding how GIS fits in an end-to-end workflow, right? So if you want to learn more about GIS, I would strongly suggest start out with a problem. Start out with an interesting problem that you're passionate about, and see how you can build a solution on top of that. And of course, it's going to be a little bit challenging if you don't know the necessary tools to do it. Maybe you don't know anything about programming, but as Sierra said, everything is available online. And I think what's really valuable there is that you really understand what are the motions that you need to go through in order to build out a solution from top to bottom. And I also, what's really valuable is you try to attain that T shape in your knowledge, right? So obviously there's an area where you're strongly focused on, whether that's machine learning or some other, or maybe it's GIS, right? But it's also super important to be able to expand out widthwise as well, so you know how your solution or your product can benefit people down the line. So yeah, that's my advice.
Excellent. Well, I don't know who the first one wants to jump in on this question. And it's kind of a combined from the Q&A and one of my questions, because I ask this question now every day, is how do you handle all of the technical changes in GIS tools? And then how do you learn these new tools? And do you recommend any like specific programming language that would maybe be more useful than others? So it's kind of this is really getting technical into the technical weeds, but how do you maintain the learning curve? What tools would you suggest maybe getting into in programming languages to get into this field? So
for the programming languages question, I would strongly suggest Python because it's very simple to use and it's an object-oriented language. And what's really neat is that really most of the programming languages are largely similar. So if you just need to be an expert in one, and after that, it's really easy for you to pick up other languages as well, whether that's Go or whether that's R. But first off, if you start with one language, I would say Python, because it's the simplest.
I'd echo Python. I use a lot of Python. Our teams use a lot of Python. I think it depends, like the technical tools, how do you handle the technical changes to the GIS tools? I think it depends a lot on what you're doing too. Like if I start to break out geography, GIS, mapping, like there's definitely an analytics piece. If you want to do analytics or you want to build software, like Python, 100% start there. If you really want to do cartography, I would start someplace, try to learn QGIS, or try to learn like other free platforms for map making. I'd add JavaScript to that too, because web maps, there's a lot of really cool libraries there for creating web maps, and that's becoming better and better and easier to learn. Coming back to that earlier question, like how do you learn the stuff? Like there's lots of good tutorials for that. And then you can just combine all of them together. I mean, when you get involved with your RISAs or your local groups too, like you tend to just kind of hear about new tools that are coming out, and then you want to learn about them, so you have to go out and learn about them.
So I would say keep an open mind about tools. Through the community, I went to American River College, and I think probably most community colleges are going to teach almost exclusively in, ESRI products because they get the software from ESRI. And so there are a lot of folks in my department who only use that. But then we've got folks like Sierra who are coming in, with this experience of, using, there's that whole open source world. And so now, as a result of that, we now have a group in our department. It's, that is kind of focused on open source GIS. And so we're all learning about it, that it's another tool in the toolbox, and you've got to keep your mind open about all the tools that are available. And, we've got a good chunk of our department works with AutoCAD and MicroStation, but that can interface with GIS tools, and some do it better than others. And so, but then, we've got folks who are, firmly embedded in ArcMap and really don't want to move to Pro, ArcGIS Pro. And even that change, that's not going to serve them well. You got to keep an open mind and be willing to jump in even when it's hard and scary. So.
Yeah, I agree with Jane. Really don't limit yourself. in the classes they will teach you, most of the time it will be, you know, an ESRI product, which is great. But it is really nice to be also to learn any type of open source you can learn, whether it's R or QGIS. I have noticed that R is pretty prevalent in scholastic settings, in classes. We basically just used R. And then when I got with the state a little bit more, I did use a little bit more Python. When I was with the state of Minnesota, they did use a lot of R, but it was mostly Python as well. And I do think that those programming languages will benefit you. So it is good to have a good concept of those, but don't limit yourself when it comes to, you know, do I need to learn this tool? Because you should just go to the workshop. Why not? Get that experience. Because if you ever do find yourself, you know, in an issue of, you know, I can't access this one software platform at the moment, you can always switch. And you want to make yourself very flexible and really practical. So you get to put that on your resume, and you can pretty much make yourself like a broad range of interest from a lot of different companies who may or may not use open source. So just never say never, and just go to the workshop, even if it doesn't seem like you may never use that software platform. You never know.
Well, that's a really good point.
I feel like
yeah, go ahead.
oh, I can wait. Go ahead.
Oh, no, I was gonna comment about David's recommendation on Python, and it's the same with the GIS tool. Once you learn ArcMap or QGIS, the learning curve to switch over isn't as great. It's just a matter of like what toe you decide to dip your, you know, to get into. But I don't know if I have any finishing thoughts on that, Burke, before I get to the next question.
I was going to build off of that same idea. I mean, I think that a QGIS or, you know, an ESRI, you know, ArcPro or something, what those are really effective at doing is teaching you methods. So you can quickly, it has a nice GUI, you can take a data source, you can try an approach, you can see an output, like you click some buttons, you get that really quickly. And, you know, when you do that, that's a really nice way to you know, learn how, you know, these tools function. But once you start to understand like what outputs you need, you can start to move a little bit away from that, needing like the GUI to do all this. Like you'd use command line, you'd use GDAL, you'd use Python, you'd use any of these other tools, and you're going to get the same outputs, but you're going to be able to, you know, structure them in a way that's repeatable, that's more scalable if you're making software or XYZ, depending on your approach. But that's just my 2 cents.
Well said. No, it's better than I could have said it. So I do appreciate that. That's why you're on the panel. And I really appreciate all of you so far. I think this is just a great group. And we've got some time left. I'm just taking a deep breath. I'm going to pivot a little bit to the sector that you are working in, or other sectors that you worked in. So when I mention sectors, it's, you know, academia versus private sector versus nonprofit versus state government. And just because I don't think students understand like the diversity of different sectors that might be out there for them in this field. So what are the benefits, do you think, of working in your sector or other sectors that you've worked in? And then what have been the challenges? Who wants to start? Like,
I'll go.
okay.
So like I said, I've only done GIS for the state, but I knew as soon as I got a job, even when I was still working as a secretary, I knew I really wanted to stay with this department. And a lot of state workers in a state like California, you've got a lot of departments where you can have promotional opportunities, transfer if you want to go to another part of the state geographically, you've got those opportunities. But I did find a really group of dedicated public servants at the Department of Water Resources, which, you know, I just like, okay, this is it. This is where I'm going to work till I retire. And even though you mentioned the salaries and that, and, you know, I would be making more if I was doing GIS under a different classification for the state, but this is the classification that I qualify for. And so I'm good with it. but then, you know, we've got a solid pension, which is really important, especially as you get older and you start thinking about that kind of stuff. So those benefits in that are great, but it's really more the community and the work we do. We serve the public, and we take a lot of pride in that. And I don't think I would last very long in the business world. Even though I've been a business owner myself, if I were to go out into the corporate world right now, I don't think I could toe the corporate line as well as I can, you know, deal with maybe the internal politics of a government department. So you got to find what's going to work for you and your personality and your values. So.
Yeah, you bring up a lot of good points. Like what is a pension, right? Do college students even understand the concept of a pension and what that gets you versus, you know, making a lot of money now and stress levels and things like that. So yeah, and in the state, you are a public servant, and if that even is a politically correct statement to use anymore, but you are here to serve your state, and you do a great job. So I do appreciate all the work that you've done. So who wants to jump in next? Talk about, you know, the benefits of your sector or other sectors you've worked in. You don't have to talk about your current one, and maybe some challenges that you're facing. Who wants to jump in next?
I'm just gonna mimic Jane and basically say that, I mean, I love working for the state. And I have so many other people that I work with. And one worry before I got to the state was, you know, oh, the state has very old-fashioned ways, and they're not going to listen to any of the new technology that's coming up. And I've really learned just the opposite. I've been so involved with the open source GIS program there, the enterprise GIS at DWR, and the brand new drone program that's come up in the past recent years. And it's just been a great opportunity. And I love the stability. I really love how much we do get to learn and how many people we get to work with. You have so many different sections. And I did love working at UC Davis as well. Some of those projects were, we were funded off some of those projects, and it was also a great experience. But I really love that the state has so many different people you get to work with and so many different options. And I really love all the new programs that we are getting in, thanks to people like Jane and other people who have open minds and really want to get new platforms out there and teach everybody about it. And I love all the training programs we have. The stability is also awesome, and I'm looking forward to a pension as well. So that's all I have to add.
Well, thank you. That's, again, good advice for sure.
I'll maybe address the question of comparing the academic sphere versus the industry sphere. I think this was brought up, Aaron, at some point. When I was at UCR, I also worked as a research assistant. And one of my biggest fears was that if I joined the industry, I wouldn't be able to have time to work on interesting research projects. And that's one of the things I was always passionate about. And I don't think that's necessarily the case, because very often it's the industry that has access to the latest tools, technologies, because money is on the line essentially. And so within the industry, there is still plenty of space and plenty of opportunities for you to work on independent research. Now, it's no longer in the form of publishing papers, but you'll be doing the same thing, except you're coming up with solutions. And I think what's also interesting is that it's only within the industry that you get a sense of exactly what problems are worth solving, because you understand what are the pain points right now for a lot of the tools that are currently being deployed. And no, that is pretty useful for you to get a sense of what areas do you think is worth exploring as an independent research project. So I think if you really are interested in academia in general, like you can find yourself a place within the industry as well.
I would echo that 100%. You know, like I work in industry now. You know, for like if I think back on just working for federal groups, working for research, now commercial. I think that there's a lot of opportunity for GIS. I mean, there's a huge chasm between approaches and methods, whether that's modeling methods, whether that's like ways to map things, whether that's like cartography, any of these things, and solving people's problems from that data. And our company, we're trying to like bridge some of these gaps. That's like one thing I was really excited about getting to do, is like actually implement research to solve real problems in real spaces. I think academia is amazing at the things you can pursue if you have the freedom to do that. I think it's really hard to get those jobs and that freedom to do that. And I think there's fewer jobs out there than you might hope when you enter, say, a grad program. On the other side, like there's tons of commercial need for geography. In Silicon Valley now, everyone's talking about how every problem is a geography problem, and everybody who's here now or who's been in GIS for a long time knows it's always been a geography problem. The place matters. So it's been kind of fun watching that kind of come to the forefront a little bit more. But I guess the other thing I'd say is, like, we were talking about salaries, all this kind of stuff too. Like, I think that companies pay for value, or perceived value for whatever you're producing. And I think that however you can frame whether it's your GIS analysis or your map making or cartography, those things, towards solving somebody's problem, if you're in commercial, like the more success you're going to have. So mapping for map's sake is fun and really great, but you'll be able to leverage problem solving easier, I think, in the real world.
All very good points. And a Silicon Valley fun fact, Elon Musk's first company was actually a GIS company, Zip2. For those who, and I actually was in the Silicon Valley during that time and almost applied there until my friend told me that the CEO was just a little bit too intense. So I moved to the foothills. Anyway, but I wanted to talk about the sectors before I ask the next question from one of our attendees. And it's, what makes a good resume? What specific skills should be on a resume? And what makes a resume stand out?
Well, I've been on a few interview panels for hiring GIS folks, and what impressed me was not so much the resume, but samples of work that that you can bring into the interview. It won't tell you that you should, bring it into the interview, but just go ahead and do it. And also I've seen folks who, will, maybe you can, while you have access to a student ArcGIS Online account, or you can access the, the $100 a year personal use ESRI account, or, some other open source solution to do this, make some stuff online that you can show to people, and then put those links into your resume. I think that's what's going to make you stand out. And yeah, I mean, we don't do a lot of paper maps these days, but we do a lot of PDF maps and, static maps as well as web maps. So have samples of all different kinds of products.
I have never actually interviewed somebody for the state, but I have included samples of some of my previous work, and I do think that it helped me get the job. So I definitely do think that looks great to have. Just to make it available, I think it can't really hurt. And I think it really is a great opportunity for you to show your hard work and what you know. So
I think when framing those resumes too, when you're reading resumes and you're getting sent a lot of resumes, like, you can tell who's read the job post and who hasn't by either what's in the resume or what's, doesn't even need to be a huge cover letter, but just a short note that describes why this job might be a good fit for you. I would highly recommend investing the time to do that, which is, it may seem frustrating, especially in this job environment where it's hard. So you may be applying to a lot of jobs. I went through this too. I mean, after I finished my PhD and transferred into industry, it took me a while to do that. It wasn't an easy jump. And, you know, it just takes just going after it and, you know, just, but coming back, like, whatever you can put in that resume or that cover letter to show that you're the right candidate for that job is going to go miles. Even if you don't get that job, like you'll be able to get in and get a conversation.
I would also add by saying that anything on your resume that shows that you are essentially flexible is always a good thing to have. So obviously you need to have access. Well, if it's a technical position, you need to have the projects, as Jane mentioned, right? A huge a repertoire of projects under your belt, but also at the same time, being aware or letting the employer know that you understand what is the bigger problem that needs to be solved, and then you are capable of also stepping in and you know, into the different, you know, if we think back to the T structure, right? If you're able to also solve some of the other problems that are either upstream or downstream of whatever it is that you're working on, shows that, you know, when it's time for you to actually have that job, you are aware whether or not what it is that you're doing is valuable at all. So I think that would be good to have definitely on your resume.
And
Say it again, you get paid for value. Get paid for value. If you show that you have cross value to other projects or other things, 100%. Sorry, I interrupted you.
Oh, no. And I saw another question about volunteer opportunities. And if you've got, you know, one or two of those, you know, that maybe involve GIS or some kind of even just statistical analysis work or something, that would really help show that you're not afraid to take on volunteer, you know, work, but also that it adds to the variety of what you do. And I'll give an example. I've worked on a couple of local, like school district political races there for school district candidates who, you know, it's a small campaign. They don't have a lot of money. And I went and got, you know, the ESRI personal use, you know, license. And I figured out how to take the data that you can obtain from the county elections office on voters, how to analyze it to figure out who are the most likely voters that you want to get your message out to. And if you've only got a certain number of lawn signs that you want to get out, where's going to be the best places to locate those, and who are the folks who are most likely to say yes, you can put the, you know, lawn sign up. And that was a fun project to just figure out how to do it. And, you know, the candidates are like, this is really cool. I would have never, you know, thought how to approach this problem. And so, you know, you got to be in kind of a problem solving mode and, you know, be creative about it. And, you know, it's, you know, it was fun to do, and I would do it again. And, you know, just look out, think, you know, every problem, like Burke said, is it's a geography problem. So you got to think of existing problems in terms of how can we use geography to help solve this. So, and there'll be folks willing to take you on as a volunteer.
And I think that the next question that you did see about volunteering is advice to someone who's undocumented, and which poses its own challenge. And I don't know if anyone on the panel has experience with that, but I know UC Merced has over 600 undocumented students and a very, very strong support system. So maybe look within the UC to help them get the pathways. But like Jane, I'm going to just repeat what Jane said, just find something that you're passionate about, you're interested in, find a researcher. I know researchers will take you on for free, but then after you graduate, yeah, that's where it does get challenging, especially in the pandemic. So then I'll go to the next question. And you can add to the first question about, you know, undocumented and how you can get volunteering experience. But the next question is, I have a concentration in GIS and have not had any luck getting a job or internship. I'm assuming it'll be easier to get a GIS related job after the pandemic is over. And so this is a challenge for those who are kind of in limbo land.
Yeah, we are in a pretty intense recession, and it's going to be a while before we climb out of this. The state is hiring, actually, still, but if you can't get a GIS job, honestly, be open to taking something else. I got into GIS because I took on an office assistant job, and it just got me in the right place, where I found supportive people. So some of that was dumb luck, but I was willing, I'm willing to do any work, if I have to, I'll take any kind of job, and so be open to that and be open to where those opportunities might lead.
I agree, Jane. I was actually in that spot when I first graduated. I did apply to a few GIS jobs, couldn't get in really, and they were strictly GIS. So my major was wildlife biology, and for many wildlife jobs, GIS work was preferred but not required. But in that way, I was still able to do something I was passionate about when I did get the job with the state. So I did get the wildlife side, but I also had some GIS, and it was split about half even, but it did keep it exciting. And a lot of jobs for really anything, GIS a lot of the times is preferred. And if you can find that sweet little spot where you find something you're passionate about, where GIS is preferred or helpful, then I would definitely get into that and make it your niche. Just get into that, and you're really going to be resourceful, because a lot of people who are focusing on one certain subject or have majored in one thing and didn't get a certificate or an emphasis or minor in GIS, they're really going to seek you out, and you're going to become a very valuable resource for that company or wherever you go. So don't limit yourself, and maybe something that doesn't have all GIS, but maybe just a little bit, and take advantage of that.
Yeah, so whoever asked that question, that person's GIS was my data science, because when I started out finding a job, I wanted to find a job purely in data science until I realized there isn't many jobs where they will hire you just for data science. It's the value is as an addition to something else that you're doing. And so I would say the same is true for GIS, right? So if you know GIS, you're already very, very valuable. And then is the question, what other domain you can bring that knowledge to where you would be adding value. So yeah.
I feel the same way, David. It was the same when I was looking for data science jobs to start out. It's all about leveraging your other experiences, or finding something that you're interested in, getting some experience in it, and leveraging that into your job beyond just having GIS. I would say that with like the software companies that are doing like Earth observation stuff or launching satellite stuff, like the GIS piece of their data science teams is critical. But I would say that they're not using like GUIs to manipulate geospatial data. Like they're trying to build software that can automate and scale the processing of that data. So I would highly suggest that anybody interested in dipping their toe in that type of work, or if you want a Silicon Valley job like that, like you should go out and take a programming class. Whether it's at your university. Learn some Python. Python will start, but again, other languages that let you build software. Anything is a good jumping off point, even for a first job. Because if you come in and say, "Hey, I know GIS," which means like I understand your geospatial problem, but you know what? I can help you build the software that fixes it. You're going to be beating out all the people who have the CS experience but don't understand the problem. And that's the opposite. It's like if you know the computer science, great, but if you don't know the problem you're trying to solve, how can you write software to fix it or to address it? So it's really hard because you need kind of both of those two things, at least in the the environment I'm working in.
Yeah, these are all excellent points, because it's again, it's really, there's no formula, right? I feel like getting into this is kind of like Jane said, dumb luck. I just kept pursuing whatever that interested me and just got rejected until I got taken on. But this next question, I think, is really more for Jane and Sierra mostly, is for federal government jobs that have to get through any automated readers. The portfolio won't help, to get in the first step. So are there any like key terms that are must have or keywords to put into a resume that would get past the first, I guess, the round. And I don't know the answer to this either, but it sounds like an interesting question.
I'm not so sure that the state of California uses these automated readers. You know, from what I've seen, I'm not a hiring, you know, manager of that, but you know, they come in, they get processed through the human resources office, who just hands off the applications and the resumes to the hiring manager, and they go through it and decide who they want to call in for an interview. It's not automated, you know, at least from what I've seen. Maybe, you know, like there's a lot of hiring going on right now with the employment development department. Oh my gosh, if you need a job, go there, you know. And it might not be GIS, but it's going to be a job, and it's going to get you in state service. I don't know, maybe they've got more automated processing because of the volume, but I really can't speak to how the federal system works at all, though. And, you know, I would maybe even caution folks, and I'm probably showing my age, you know, on this, but I wouldn't necessarily use those or count on those as any of these, you know, massive services to find the job. You can use it maybe to do some research, but you got to go do your research on your own. You know, go to the state of California website. You could spend hours and hours and hours on there just trying to figure out, you'll learn those keywords, you know. look at all different job classifications, and you'll figure it out.
Yeah, I would agree with Jane. It really depends on the title you're looking for. Most people start out at the state. If you're just fresh out, I started out as a scientific aide. No requirement, no of tests. So you typically don't need to take an exam to become a scientific aide. It's kind of like the starting point. And there, I would make sure, if you are, this is just for the state, I would check out the duty statement. So it goes into more description about what your specific job duties are and what percentage of those job duties are that you will be performing throughout your daily activities or throughout the week. And I would take that, and like Jane said, do your research, read up on that, and do try and allude to some of those. If you do have experience in something that they have in the duty statement, absolutely include that. And as for like an environmental scientist position, Jane was saying, you know, a lot of these environmental scientists, a big part of their duties are creating maps for some of their research, or for some of their work, for their project areas. For that, there is an exam. So you will be taking an exam, and it is graded immediately. So my advice for that is to make sure that you do fill out all the open word answers, but you do want to make sure to you know, be honest about how much experience you have, but don't cut yourself short or limit yourself. Obviously, don't put you have 20 plus years doing everything if you don't, but for that, it is like a scale-based system and a point-based system. So just make sure if you do have a little bit of experience with something, make sure to include that when you are saying, you know, how many months or years of experience that you might have when you are taking the environmental scientist exam. I took that about a few months ago before I got hired. So definitely, you know, don't cut yourself short when it comes to taking those exams.
I mean, if I think back on colleagues who work, you know, in federal agencies, I can't speak to the state of California, but federal agencies, state agencies like Oregon, like a lot of how they got into those positions was starting with an internship or a volunteer experience or something. I mean, networking is such an important part of those jobs as well. You're going to be a lot more attractive candidate for a position at a certain unit if you've worked in that unit before.
That's so true. That's why we're here. We're networking, right? And I don't want to leave. I know it's 4 o'clock. I want to give thank you to all 4 of our panelists on behalf of the UC GIS Week Planning Committee, and a special thank you to Leah for assembling this great panel. And as Leah mentioned in the chat, USA Jobs is a place to go as far as federal jobs. And just again, don't be afraid to kind of reach out and ask questions within your own network. And again, the fact you're here is a big step. And I hope that this career panel is useful. And again, the time that our panel is given is very valuable. So I appreciate that. And if anyone else has anything to close, any closing advice from the panel here?
Network. you gotta network with people, you know. Find some folks who are already in the industry and talk to them and volunteer to help them out.
I'd say, you know, be dogged too. The better the job, the harder it is to get and the longer it takes. That's just, I think that's true. If you think about, like, even if you just use something like, you know, education requirements for different types of jobs, like there's like ballpark estimates that, like, say you need a you know, a BS, you know, takes this much time, a master's can take this much time. So, I mean, if you're looking for your dream job, I mean, it could take some time. It's not going to fall in your lap. So just stay dogged and keep chasing it. And even if you don't get that perfect dream job, like, well, maybe your new job will lead you there too. So just, you know, stay at it. This stuff takes time.
When you, so this is more of a, I guess more of a less motivational advice, more of a practical one. But when you apply for these kinds of jobs, don't look at the title. Don't think that you have to have, you know, GIS in the title in order for this to be an actual GIS job. Look at the actual description. And if you have any questions, you know, reach out to HR, understand what it is that you're doing. So there's plenty of jobs out there that don't have GIS in the title, but in fact, you are a GIS analyst. So look out for those.
Yeah, just attend those virtual MAPI hours and just get to know people personally. Send them a message on LinkedIn. If you're interested in their work, ask about it and just get to know people. They're really, everybody who does, most people I've met in GIS are very interested in their work and they love to talk about it. So don't be afraid to reach out on LinkedIn or elsewhere.
Well, again, I think this has been just really helpful and valuable. And thank you again. And hope to see all of you in person one of these days instead of on the screen. And hope you can attend mini sessions on Wednesday and Thursday. Keep up with the Slack channel and check the website. But on that note, I just, again, heartfelt thank you for the panel and giving us your time and advice. So have a great day and we'll see you tomorrow.
Thank you for hosting. It was really great talking to everybody.
Yeah.
And anyone who's on here still, you know, please feel free to ping me, or I'm sure others here too, if any questions or anything.
Same here.
Thanks.
Yeah. Bye. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.